Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded, and this video will link to some recent series as well as some older posts, and it really brings things all together. But we're looking at, in inverted commas, air quotes, coincidences, and in regards to ancient geometry, the knowledge of therein, astronomy and architecture, but especially connections with pi, the Pythagorean Theorem, and squaring the circle. So squaring the circle, that's one of these interesting things. Now, it's one of the four problems of antiquity, as I put it, compass and straight edge problems. Back in in Greeks, they did their proof with geometry. Arithmetic, math, and geometry couldn't separate them. It worked the same, but squaring the circle to construct a square whose area equals that of a given circle. Now, there are quotes been now connected, but anyway, so it's Jung brings this up and mentions it sort of as an archetype thing, and well, it's a geometry problem. It's an unsolvable problem with compass and straight edge, and that's so you often hear the phrase someone is trying to square a circle, usually in terms of politics or business or law. That's a phrase or variations of someone trying to solve or an unsolvable problem. Forget the typos there. But now I'll put the link in the description to especially this Pythagorean Theorem, how it connects to the Megaliths, Freemasons, and other groups. Links will be in the description. Also, I'll drop in the series on the Egyptian Royal Cubit, which would connect, and also pi, phi, and how the cubit and the meter comes together. I'll try to remember put those links in there too. But this is from the previous video where we're looking at Pythagorean Theorem, being, say, the Greeks are acknowledged as using it. You can find it in the Parthenon. You can find it in Stonehenge, Woodhenge as well, Carnac, Cromlech in Carnac in France, and the pyramids as well. So especially to Masons, but also older Hermetic traditions, the 3, 4, 5 triangle is a potent symbol, very practical, but it's also in all their symbolism as well. Pardon me. Mentioned Lachlan Macquarie, very important figure in setting up the town planning in regards to Australia. We see there's reflections in this in Canada, New Zealand, Australia as well, many other places. But his street plans were built on these Pythagorean theorems of 3, 4, 5, as well as 5, 12, 13, these Pythagorean triplets. Also, we'll get to that in a moment, but the street widths that he put in there as well. But we saw, again, the 5, 12, 13 in Stonehenge, also the 3, 4, 5. Alexander Thom did work on this. Also at Woodhenge, the 12, 35, 37. So all these Pythagorean triplets in ancient sites there in England, and back to the Cromlech in Carnac in France, again the 3, 4, 5 triangle. All these sites are by the measures too. They have wonderful metrology. They're at harmony points connecting multiple units of ancient measure together at very potent numbers, not just sort of any random number, but very special ones. But also the use of Pythagorean Theorem in ancient Egypt. So Pythagorean Theorem, but now some another important geometric problem, and that's squaring the circle. Squaring a circle, geometry, and how all this will connect, especially through the quadrivium, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. So mentioned already in here in Australia, you can find this elsewhere, but Lachlan Macquarie, a conscientious Freemason, not just like a member in terms of a social club, but a practitioner of the craft. And he also, the street widths the width of the streets was set at 66 feet. This is an important feature. We'll come back to that. So mentioned Pythagorean Theorem at the Cromlech, and we'll just not too far away, very close to it, part of this Carnac complex of stone and all this other stuff. But we have the Manio quadrilateral. So Manio quadrilateral, there we see it here, this ancient stonework, part of a greater complex around Carnac. And Alexander Thom as well, very important figure in regards to systems of measure, but surveying all of these sites. And there's a few out, if you just put in your search engine, and people have been showing astronomical connections, which you can find in the pyramids, in Stonehenge and other sites as well. But what's special about this is that it's, well, 33 feet, some might get the reference there, wide, and 121 feet long, which creates a 3:11 ratio, which brings us to squaring the circle, or this very close approximate. Now we can see, so the circle on the outside and this square. This is an important feature. Now, this is Stonehenge, of course, so, well, we see the same thing, the 3:11 ratio appearing in there. The Parthenon, the columns themselves, so 48 feet, because usually when you measure columns you start just there from underneath the pediment, and but that's a 3 module to 11 module, 3:11. So that's the Great Pyramid plan. And there we can see now the Great Pyramid is 11 at the base to 7 high. So that's, just do a quick sum, that's 7 to 11. That gives us this 3:11 ratio, because, yeah, imagine, so that's, if the height is, okay, so if the radius, or the half of the Great Pyramid, is 11, therefore the height would be 14, so 14 to 11, 3 plus 11 is 14, that's where that comes from. So the Great Pyramid has the same system ratio built in. The Meidum Pyramid in Egypt, that's also at a 7 to 11 ratio, which gives us this 11 to 3. And the Red Pyramid, well, next to the Red Pyramid there's a capstone. It was put back together. Now it's been, well, I'd call it vandalized, and they've changed it, but originally it was 1 meter high, and the width was pi over 2 meters, or 3 Egyptian Royal Cubits, 1 meter to 3 cubits high, which creates this same ratio. And so you can put that in there, but these are all the same. And that also gives us like pi and phi ratios in there, all very close approximates. So I've done other videos going into the details of it, because the minute little variations in the pyramid actually count, but we have pi and phi for Metre and the Royal Cubit connected to the Parthenon, and also at the Manio quadrilateral in Carnac, which also has the Pythagorean Theorem, Stonehenge as well, and just like the town plans here in Sydney by the conscientious practitioner of the craft, Freemason Governor Lachlan Macquarie. And he also made the streets 66 feet wide. Well, why is that important? Because the streets are 66 feet wide, but the carriageway themselves is 42 feet. So 12 feet of sidewalk or footpath, however you want to put it, on either side. And that converts to, in fathom, that's 11 to 7. 7 to 11, just like all these places. So that fits in to this 3, there you can see, fits right in there. Nice stuff. Pi, phi, and what else does that do? Well, the size of the Earth in relation to the Moon, so the Moon is essentially 27.3%. That's just, so if 11 is 1, then 3 is 0.272727, or 27.3 if you just round it off to, 27.272727. So the size of the Moon and the Earth is also contained in this lovely coincidence of phi, pi, squaring the circle, and Pythagorean Theorem, which all these sites have embedded in them as well. But what's also important is that the Moon doesn't orbit around the center of the Earth. It orbits around a point called the barycenter, because the Moon has weight and the Earth has weight, and that's how they're balanced. Now the barycenter, so if the radius of the Earth is 11, the barycenter is 3 to 11. However, because of the elliptical orbits, this varies ever so slightly. And what's important about that? Well, that actually contains even more lovely stuff in there. So, for instance, at its towards the large end of when the barycenter's at its most, let's call below the surface, it passes through 1,080 miles. That's the radius of the Moon. The Moon is 2,160 miles across, so that's half the Moon describes the barycenter. And back to the pyramids is pi and, well, phi, the golden number. Well, what does that mean? So at its low, when the barycenter is at its smallest compared to the surface of the Earth, it's at 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles is phi times 1,000 kilometers. The quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, the Hermeticists are especially now into the conscientious architectural craft Freemasonry, as opposed to the social one, have been practicing this, and they put it in there. The Louvre Pyramid, or Cloud Gate in Chicago, or this, and this 66 to 42 feet is a pretty much a constant in the US as well. So this use of 66 feet by 42, you'll find that in many other places. 66 feet is one Gunther's chain, and Gunther, Hermeticist, he embedded so much knowledge in weights and measures, and not just the numbers but the proportions too as well, which is a very important recurring theme. They don't just put it in number, but they also put it in proportion, and those proportions happen to be hovering around beautiful numbers, phi and pi, for instance, and that in itself embeds a whole bunch of, and this is the tip of the iceberg. I could go on for quite some time in regards to the connections here, but it's all weights and measures, geometry of a quadrivium. It all blends in together. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Very, very true. So, of course, feel free to check these numbers, check these things. It's there, it's out there to be checked, and well, it's there, it's measurable, and it's very beautiful, and it connects to Pythagorean Theorem through pi and phi. That will also connect to the square root of 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 5, and on it goes. And it's in all over Egypt, not just once or twice, but other places. You'll find again the Parthenon. You'll find it in Stonehenge, which also has, well, Pythagorean Theorem, and also in this other ancient cluster of the Manio quadrilateral there in Carnac in France, which in itself has astronomical alignments, as do all these other sites. This is a constant in there as well, and it's there to be tested, there to be measured, and it's all there. What more can you say? There's so much that extends from this, because these same proportions are also embedded in the metrology, the number systems, and not just in one unit of measure, but in multiple ancient units of measure, how they all connect. It is part of a coherent ancient system to do with the quadrivium, and basically to embed these beautiful harmonies that are not just in the math and geometry themselves, but how they apply on a much larger scale, such as the golden ratio in sunflowers and many other aspects. And so anyway, hope you enjoyed. Have a good one, and remember, study, and the truth shall set you free.